It's September 12th, 2024, and Crowd Control Productions, CCP, developer of EVE Online, announces the reveal for an upcoming game titled EVE Frontier. This is it. This has gotta be EVE Online 2. Right? Alright, look. We all know it's too good to be true. It's a cinematic trailer. It's not EVE 2. But I know what you're thinking. Oh, obviously it's a mobile game, right? Because it's got a really fancy cinematic trailer. It's gotta be a mobile game. Naturally, this spawned a lot of questions from people both within and without EVE Online's communities. People wanted to know, what is EVE Frontier? Except a good amount of the EVE Online community actually did know what EVE Frontier was. And in fact, they knew about it in advance of the announcement. They knew that because before it was EVE Frontier, it had been known by its internal project name, Project Awakening. You see, for about a year or so prior, Project Awakening had been leaking information left and right, whether it was by CCP's own hands accidentally revealing private game tester guides and internal wikis to the general public via improperly set up web pages, or be it via testers just violating their NDAs. So, those who were keeping their eyes on the pulse of EVE Online knew fully well what Project Awakening, EVE Frontier, really was. It's Web3. It's blockchain. It's crypto. It's probably play to earn too. Now, I could leave it at that, simply satisfying the what is it question. But it's 2025, and I've seen a lot of people question why CCP are doing this now. Why now, after it seems like Web3 and blockchain and crypto are in our rearview mirror? Why make a game like this at all? In order to understand why, we have to go into the past. Because to understand the story of why EVE Frontier exists, we need to understand the perspective of CCP circa about 2010 and how they were navigating the ever-changing gaming industry, especially as it began to tackle concepts like monetization. Which means that this is actually a story about greed. The year is 2011. Yes, we're going way back, but that's just what happens with a 22-year-old MMO. And though this may seem like a bit of a jump, I would say that it's still very relevant to what's going on today. Those familiar with EVE Online history will know why we need to talk about this moment in time without me even needing to say more. 2011 is a year permanently etched into the minds of many EVE veterans. This story has been covered extensively and even still gets written about to this day, so I won't dive too deep into what happened. We're mostly interested in the ideologies on display here. CCP are gearing up for a big update to EVE Online, Incarnate. Until now, EVE Online has been a third-person game about a spaceship which happens to have a space capsule inside of it, which happens to contain a picture of a person inside of the capsule. Incarnate is the Walking in Stations update. Ambulation.
I was there. I'm telling you. I was there.
3D character avatars which can leave the ship and do something. EVE Online has been flourishing since it released in 2003. It's a plucky sci-fi sandbox game about spaceships, and it's made in Iceland. It's seeing a constant rate of growth in its player base, and on January 23, 2011, EVE Online will reach 63,170 concurrent accounts, the second highest concurrency the game will ever see in its lifetime. By June, 10,000 will be gone. By December, concurrencies drop to 40,000, and CCP will lay off 20% of their staff. The reasons are multitude, but in the zeitgeist of what will become one of the most famous consumer actions in the gaming industry, the reason has a name and it has a face. Gordon Gekko. The reason even has a tagline. Greed is good. Within CCP is a newsletter called Fearless. The name is evocative of the company's ideologies. CCP are world changers, boundary pushers. When EVE Online debuted in 2003 as a large-scale MMO with a persistent player economy, they were living on the cutting edge of the gaming industry. They were being fearless.
All the bad stuff on the table. We're making a crypto game. I promise it's going to be good. I promise. It was very similar when we said we were going to make a game on a database. Like EVE Online is the first database game, believe that or not. Tim here used to work on Ultima Online. Remembers well, he was just storing the state of Ultima Online in a flat file on the server disk. And when I said, we're going to use a database to make an MMO, people were like, weird. Some elves in Iceland are going to use a database to make an MMO. Silly people.
On May 11th, 2011, Gordon Gekko appears on the front page of CCP's internal newsletter asking employees a simple question. Greed is good? Question mark. If it wasn't already clear earlier with Project Awakening, CCP aren't very good at keeping secrets. Internal things have a tendency to become external things. This will become a bit of a running theme for them. This release of Fearless is their first of the year, and it's also a special edition. The contents of the newsletter are a debate on the future of not just EVE Online, but all of CCP's products going into the microtransaction-laden future of the post-2010 gaming industry. It's not really a debate, though. The articles contained within are really just opinion pieces from CCP employees advocating for various kinds of microtransactions in video games, often with highly consumeristic ideologies and rhetoric. One feature is a yes versus no debate, but in actuality, it's one employee advocating for a measured approach to microtransactions, which emphasizes vanity item purchases, versus another employee advocating for selling players the ability to save more ship fittings and complaining about how he doesn't understand why that makes me Hitler to some EVE players. He knows these changes will be unpopular, but there's money to be made. For context, a ship fitting is like if a player in a fantasy MMO could open up a chest of all of their items and press a button to equip a different set of gear they've saved as a preset. In EVE, these are saved as a block of plain text. The employee was suggesting charging players to save more lines of plain text to change the equipment on their ships easily. Why they're talking about these issues is pretty straightforward. As the editor of the newsletter puts it, as a subscription-based golden goose, EVE needs to incorporate the virtual goods sales model to allow for further revenue to fund our other titles, revenue for its developer, you being CCP employees. The model also supports the notion of creating a meaningful experience and identity for the player. The rules are changing. CCP needs to change too. They need to be fearless. The pure subscription model for games, even though quite well suited for the selling of holistic experiences, takes little advantage of this part of human nature. Many players will actually voice the opinion that adding any kind of consumerism to such a game will ruin their experience. Those same players will buy Plex without any qualms to get instant access to the ship that they just need to have right now. And they might even go so far as buying a $500 leather jacket that matches the one their avatar is wearing. And all of these expenditures will actually improve their experience of the game and make them feel better about it and themselves. Now, does that mean we should go for unbridled evil consumerism, trying to squeeze every single penny from our hapless customers? Of course not. We are certainly competing for the time that people allocate for leisure and pleasure in one way or another. The importance of appearance ties directly into our notion of vanity, recognition, and validation. This, again, heavily influences your potential emotional response of the experience, so we are also selling people a social identity or a persona. At this point, you might also start to notice a bit of a theme starting to manifest. In 1992, the term Metaverse was coined.
We were just so, not game developers. But what we had done is that there was a company in Iceland founded in 92 to make the Metaverse. So we had made a VRML browser, virtual reality modeling language was the hot thing in the 90s. It was supposed to be the 3D internet, very Neil Stephenson, Snowcrash inspired. We had dancing aliens. We were broadcasting Contrast. Internet World 98, we owned it. We had like a motion captured singer in New York singing in a live on the internet in full motion capture to thousands of people over like voice over IP and God knows what. And nobody needed the Metaverse. But to make the Metaverse work on 286s required some like serious understanding of network stacks and whatnot. So we more had sort of enterprise software developers rather than game developers. We were more...
Again, Incarnate is the Walking in Stations update. It breathes new, human 3D model life into the spaceships and spreadsheets video game. It's the first step towards CCP realizing a metaverse of its own, where players can buy $70 monocles for their space-rich EVE characters and enjoy an immersive social and economic experience with the other denizens of this virtual world. By the way, that thing about the monocle, it's not a comedy bit or anything. Yes, they actually did sell a $70 monocle for player avatars, and according to the CEO, some people actually did buy them. Anyways, EVE, it's a virtual world that's notorious for cutthroat players, large-scale PvP wars, and genuine acts of spycraft and subterfuge. You know, it's like Second Life for VR chat. Of course, this ideology of virtual goods was not exclusive to EVE Online. CCP at this time had taken ownership of World of Darkness, known for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines and associated tabletop RPGs, and they were even producing an MMORPG for the IP. At that time, they were also developing EVE tie-in FPS called Dust 514, which will infamously become exclusive to the PS3 while it was near its end of life, and effectively become dead on arrival. As someone who played a little bit of Dust 514, it mostly just felt like a worse version of Battlefield to me. I know that there are some people who have a much more positive and rosy opinion of it, though. One thing I should add is that this edition of Fearless claims that the articles within are just opinions of CCP employees and do not reflect company policy. Anyways, here's an excerpt from the featurette by then Director of Content Design at CCP. CCP is in the process of adopting a virtual sales model for its game products. While this model has always been intended for World of Darkness and Dust 514, you may be wondering how this will work in EVE Online. Not all virtual purchases will focus on customization. Some will simply be new items, ammunition, ships, etc. that can be purchased outright. The devil, as always, is in the details. Rather, we will affect a universal strategy of microsales throughout the EVE experience. So, as a player, while you are inside a station, you will find gameplay that links to other aspects of the game that also present you with virtual purchasing opportunities. Although these particular desires won't come to pass, if you're a World of Tanks player, your eyes probably started twitching a little bit near the beginning there. After all, why stop at $70 monocles for avatars? Or making people pay for extra storage for a few lines of plain text? As stated at the beginning of the newsletter, though, these are just opinions. Anyways, here's an excerpt from CCP game designer for Dust 514. On the opposite end of the scale to vanity goods are performance-based items such as weapons. They are consumed through gameplay, making them potentially a powerful source of renewable income. Selling them for real money is very tempting. Selling them, though, is highly controversial. We are planning on doing so. I would be tempted to say it is because we are fearless, but the real reason is that we have strong evidence that selling performance enhancers in moderation works. Korean developers have capitalized on performance-enhancing items for a long time, but it took a leap of faith from people developing Battlefield heroes to show that the same principles that work in Korea apply for the Western market as well. Again, though, this is just an employee opinion. This is not policy. Right? While we're here, people familiar with CCP and EVE Online might have perked up a little bit at the end of that passage. Korean developers? Wouldn't it be funny if 7 years later CCP was sold to Pearl Abyss, the South Korean developer and publisher of Black Desert Online? Now, logically speaking, though Pearl Abyss did exist in 2010, they did not release Black Desert Online until 2014, but it does make for an amusing coincidence. I would actually love nothing more than to talk more about Pearl Abyss's acquisition of EVE Online on CCP, but unfortunately there's really not a lot to go on beyond the press releases. There's some claims and some theories, but if there's an expose on the matter, I'm just not aware of it. Sorry about that. Anyways, I know I said I wouldn't dive too deep into this, but there's one more excerpt from Great is Good. Remember though, these are just employee opinions, not company policy. Virtual goods sales are a hot topic these days, and more companies are moving toward them, CCP included. If handled well, virtual goods sales are far from a greedy money grab that impoverishes the players. When CCP has more money to put into development, the players get more goodies to play with. World of Darkness itself wouldn't be in development if we didn't have the revenue to support it. There is an unfortunate bit of prophecy that's being made here. By the end of 2011, World of Darkness won't be in development. Of the approximately 25 names that appear in this leaked issue of Fearless, I could only verify 3 of them as being current CCP employees. Most were removed from the company in various layoffs from 2011 to 2014, with a couple of them departing much later on. World of Darkness is dead, and White Wolf has effectively been slain. World of Darkness would later see the light again, when the IP was sold off to Paradox Interactive, but at this point the IP is starting to look a little bit cursed. How this happened shouldn't be too surprising. After all, even CCP themselves knew it was going to happen, but I'll sum it up. In 2006, Bethesda gave the world horse armor, and the world was less than enthused. In 2011, CCP sold $70 monocles for avatars to wear in a small room that would later be removed from the game altogether. Greed is Good hit the press among a slew of other troubles in EVE Online, and the reaction was as one would imagine. CCP's reputation was tarnished, and the players rioted. And the rest is a piece of gaming history still worthy of mention to this day. As the flames of passionate anger in the EVE Online community grew ever higher, the CEO of CCP, Hilmar Petursson, wrote an internal email. And look, we all know where this is going. Somebody leaked the email to the public. Date Thursday, the 23rd of June, 2011. Sent by Hilmar to CCP Global List. We live in interesting times. In fact, CCP is the kind of company that if things get repetitive, we instinctively crank it up a notch. That we have certainly done this week. First off, we have Incarna, an amazing technological and artistic achievement. A vision from years ago realized to a point that no one could have imagined but a few months ago. It rolls out without a hitch, is in some cases faster than we thought before. This is the pinnacle of professional achievement. For all the noise in the channel, we should all stand proud. Years from now, this is what people will remember. But we have done more. Not only have we redefined the production quality one can apply to virtual worlds with the beautiful Incarna, but we have also defined what it really means to make virtual reality more meaningful than real life when it comes to launching our new virtual goods currency, Arum. Naturally, we have caught the attention of the world. Only a few weeks ago, we revealed more information about Dest 514, and now we have done it again by committing to our core purpose as a company by redefining assumptions. After 40 hours, we have already sold 52 monocles, generating more revenue than any of the other items in the store. This we have done after months of research by a group of highly competent professionals soliciting input and perspective from thought leaders and experts in and around our industry. We have communicated our intention here internally in very wide circles through the Virtual Economy Summit presentation at the GSM, our Fearless newsletter, sprint reviews, email lists, and other channels. This should not come as a surprise to anyone. Currently, we are seeing very predictable feedback on what we are doing. Having the perspective of having done this for a decade, I can tell you that this is one of the moments where we look at what our players do and less of what they say. Innovation takes time to set in, and the predictable reaction is always to resist change. We went out with a decisive strategy on pricing, and we will stay the course and not flip-flop around or knee-jerk react to the predictable. That is not saying nothing will change. On the contrary, in fact, we know that success in this space is through learning and adapting to what is actually happening, and new knowledge gained in addition to what we knew before and expected. All that said, I couldn't be prouder of what we have accomplished as a company. Changing the world is hard, and we are doing it as so many times before. Stay the course. We have done this many times before. And so, CCP looked at what the players did, rather than just hearing their predictable feedback. And then CCP went into damage control mode. Thus far, we've only really heard the voices of CCP employees, a smattering of what seemed to be mostly management types. Enter CCP Hilmar Veigar Petursson, who, as I understand it, was promoted from Chief Technical Officer of CCP to its CEO in 2004. Since it's now 2025, and hopefully it still is by the time I release this, Hilmar has been the CEO of the company for about 21 years. That means that for 1 year shy of the entire lifetime of EVE Online, CCP has had a single CEO. Like he said in his email, CCP is capturing the attention of the world. They're redefiners, working with thought leaders and experts. They've changed the world before, and they're doing it again. Researching his activities, I get a sense that he's looking ever forward. He's tracking the pulse of the industry to spot the next place CCP can plant their flag of fearless progress. They broke new ground with server tech and EVE Online in 2003, and it seems like Hilmar is aiming to do something equally interesting. Incarna is an unfortunate catastrophe. As a CCP employee put it in an interview, the problem is that we were doing virtual goods and character customization for the first time, and it just didn't go as well as it did for some other companies who have been at this for years. But at the end of the day, I don't think virtual goods are inherently bad, I just don't think we did the implementation well enough. I mean, we haven't been delivering the stuff we've been promising players. So, if anything, I hope we can regain some of that trust by doing all the spaceship stuff. And although this fiasco will effectively kill a company and result in the laying off of 20% of CCP's staff, there is still a light at the end of this tunnel for EVE Online. CCP Hilmar writes a public apology letter. I was wrong, and I admit it, he says. His letter is lengthy and detailed, with just the right amount of humility to assuage the anger of the gaming community. CCP will continue to do virtual goods, but the game won't be pay to win. The scope will stay limited and focus on vanity items, unless the MMO business changes radically. For anyone raising an eyebrow at that last part, yes, the MMO business will change radically, and CCP will start offering things other than vanity items in EVE. My zeal for pushing EVE to her true potential made me lose sight of doing the simple things right. Those words, EVE's true potential, always stuck with me. In the disastrous wake of Incarna, what exactly does CCP view as EVE's true potential? Well, in the grimdark future of 2025, we might have our answer. Regardless, for a time, EVE Online focuses on more spaceship stuff, and the bleed of players is effectively reversed. In 2013, EVE will see its all-time user peak at 65,000. Approximately 2 years after the leak of Greed is Good. In the years following Incarna, CCP would do some spaceship stuff, but in doing so, would release several updates which made changes to EVE Online that were controversial. It's impossible to pin down any one thing over those ensuing years. It seems more like a death by a little cut sort of issue. There was a de-energization of the EVE Online community to such a degree that player counts would shrink to around 30,000, where the player population would more or less remain to this day. Somehow. Ultimately, trust in CCP had waned, and many just chose to move on. CCP's next big thing, its FPS game, Dust 514, would flounder as a console-exclusive FPS from a PC MMORPG developer. People are laid off. Again, while we're in FPS land, this next FPS title that they're working on, I think was internally called Project Nova, and that got canceled. There also might have been 1 or 2 additional FPS prototypes that were in development, and I think those got canceled too. Right now, they're dealing with EVE Vanguard, which, as I understand it, is some kind of extraction shooter hybrid thing. And I think they started working on that back in 2018 or something like that. It's 2025, and it's still sort of publicly in beta, and I've heard that it's I don't know. I've heard people say that it's not that good. I don't know. I'm not going to touch it. I don't care. So, moving on. As we start pushing ahead into the timeline to the mid-2010s, we're going to start seeing CCP start to invest in things like virtual reality and start engaging more mobile game projects, following the fads that were happening around that time period. At the same time, we're going to hear CCP Hilmar start talking about things like blockchain and crypto and play to earn And then he's going to start talking about NFTs as that fad starts to come into play. And you're going to start to notice a bit of a trend here. That, however, is something I'm going to save for the part 2 of this video.
So this idea with like, okay, we need to solve for the liquidity. And okay, here are crypto nerds that have bottled up $1 trillion of loose liquidity. If somebody were to play an MMO for 20 years, accumulate thousands of dollars in saving, needs to liquidate it quickly because they need to pay a medical bill, well, okay, if you merge these two things together, good things should be able to come from that.